Hey everybody, it's Norm from Testin, and welcome back to another episode of Projections, where today we're going to be reviewing the new HP Reverb G2. This is the final production shipping unit that some people are starting to get out there. I've been testing this for the past week and a half or so, and it's an interesting headset, not only because of the tech and the specs and the experience, but also because it's one of the few headsets that we had a chance to actually go spend time with an earlier prototype. HP sent me an early pre-production unit back in August. I gave some impressions there, and there have been some notable changes from that test unit to what's actually shipping for consumers. The other interesting thing about the Reverb G2 is kind of the state of VR headsets right now. Even things that have been changing in the past week or so may give potential consumers out there, you out there, more to consider and more pause when thinking about what type of VR headset you might be buying this holiday season. And HP has already announced that because demand for this headset is so high, if you haven't pre-ordered and you want to get this, it's a $600 headset with controllers. You won't actually get it till the new year. So there's a lot to consider, things that might even change on the software side and things that have yet to be announced, including what the controllers cost by themselves. But let's go through, take a step back, and talk about this headset if you haven't heard of it yet. So this is a Windows mixed reality headset. This is basically the flagship in that VR ecosystem. It uses WMR's inside-out tracking, and HP has added 2 additional cameras to improve the tracking on this headset over the past first generation Windows mixed reality headsets, even though it still uses Microsoft's tracking algorithms, and you have to use this and load it in through the mixed reality portal. But for all intents and purposes, you can think of this as a Steam VR headset because you're going to be most likely playing your games through Steam VR. Steam recognizes this as a VR headset. All the games are compatible, and they've actually developed this headset in partnership with Valve to incorporate some of the features that we saw, of course, in the Valve Index. Notable things, of course, also it uses the same speaker system as the Valve Index, even though it's not the exact same model. There are just a little bit of fit and finish differences, but the audio quality is amazing. It's just as it was in the pre-production unit. And some of the other fit and finish stuff looks a little more polished. It's the final plastic, things that they didn't change and they weren't going to change from those pre-production units were how you put the headset on. So there's no knob in the back like you would have on the Valve Index or even on the Elite head strap on the Oculus side to tighten the headset. So you're using the same Velcro system on the 3 points, the 2 sides, and the top strap here, and there's a little bit of springiness here. Not as good of that spring system as we saw on like the first generation Rift headsets. But really, it's all about the display. So the big selling point on the Reverb G2, and in fact the first Reverb G1, is that it uses the highest pixel density panels. They're 2160 by 2160 per eye, now RGB stripe LCD panels in this headset. It's a newer version of what we saw on the G1, and the optics combined with those panels, the optics are now co-developed by Valve Software. So it inherits a lot of the great optical fidelity that we saw in the Valve Index, even though this is still about a 88-degree diagonal field of view, much smaller than that 110-degree potential field of view in the Valve Index you got by pushing the lens close to your eye. There is no eye relief adjustment here. But the good news is some of the complaints I had about the optical clarity and some of the lensing artifacts that I saw in the pre-production prototype have actually been addressed. There are actually new lenses here compared with the pre-production prototype. And I'm happy to report that the sweet spot of clarity, both in terms of where the eye box is, how much kind of like fiddling you have to do to land your eye right in the center, that has been greatly improved. And so little bits of, I'm doing less adjustment, I guess, when I have the headset on. And also just the clarity across the optics themselves has been improved, at least in terms of the chromatic aberration. Near the outside edges of the lenses, things do look a little blurry, but the Microsoft has actually compensated for a lot of that in software. And so things like the mirror effects that you saw on the G1, that's gone. God rays also greatly reduced, actually very noticeably so on this headset, and I'm almost getting no chromatic aberration at all on this. So visual fidelity wise, not just the clarity of that pixel density, which is incredible, but just the optics, they really have done a great job with them here, to a point where when I'm thinking about, which headset I want to put on, which desktop PC headset, previously I defaulted to the Valve Index for that wider field of view, for the higher refresh rate. Here, narrower field of view, very comparable to like what you see on the Quest 2, and it's at 90 Hertz. I'm actually going to this headset more because of that visual fidelity. I was replaying Half-Life Alyx with that new developer commentary that Valve put out, replaying the game, enjoying it, and it looks so good. Rendered 100%, even doing some super sampling in this headset. I'm running it now on a 2070 Super, so I don't even have a 3000 series card yet. And SteamVR, interestingly, at 100% rendering, is rendering at a higher pixel resolution than this native headset, so you actually have to slide that a little bit down. I actually ran it at 100%, super sampled, with Half-Life Alyx, was not noticing performance drops, 90 Hertz, totally fine. And the geometry detail of the levels, I mean, it makes me want to hold objects, pick them up, whether they're head crabs or the weapons, and really examine them because they look so good. It's almost so good to a point where the textures, even in a game like that, can't keep up with how good the geometry looks when rendered at native or higher resolution, as in this headset. Particle effects, things like rendered text, everything looks so amazing in this headset. And even games that don't require higher graphical fidelity. A game I'm playing a lot right now is Population 1. It's a cross-platform game. It works on the mobile VR side on the Quest and Quest 2, but playing it at super sampled, high resolution geometry, all the weapon models look so much better. It's so noticeably better on a headset like this than even rendered at the relatively high resolution of the Oculus Quest 2. So from a visual standpoint, I think HP really nailed it. I'm really impressed that they actually improved the optics and had new lenses in their production units just several months after the pre-production versions I was able to use. Now, they're also further down the visual pipeline, this cable, some changes as well. So it connects your computer over USB-C, and they actually do include a USB-C to USB-A adapter. Some people, myself included, had some issues running off the front panel connector USB-C ports on it, and so I'm glad they now bundle that adapter. And also external power is required. So it's a 5-meter cable to this very small breakout box, and then you have a 1-meter cable length that goes to DisplayPort, and they do include a mini DisplayPort adapter if you want to run this on a laptop, as well as USB-C, which I then plug into my USB 3.0 Type A port on the back of my computer. And the last port on this adapter here is for power. So this is just a standard 45-watt HP laptop power brick, and it's required now for this headset because of the power requirements over the 5-meter cable. That took away all the reliability issues I had with the USB-C power on the pre-production unit, and HP will be selling a version of the G2 for mobile VR, well, for backpack-based, laptop-based VR, where it's going to be a 1 meter cable from the headset to the splitter here, and you can actually power it via 2 USB ports, one for data, one for power. Going back to the front of the headset itself, this does have Ipd adjustment. The range is lower than what you'd find on the Index. It goes from 60 millimeters to 68 millimeters. It's actually lower than what you'd find on the Quest 2 as well. That was 58 to 68. And, I think it's probably a non-issue because of the optical clarity of the lenses. And the reason I can say that, even though I haven't given this to other people to wear, is I actually found the Ipd adjustment to be pretty loose. It was actually really easy for me to knock this and move this. And I had it off my preferred Ipd for a while, and it was still comfortable. I couldn't notice it. It wasn't that bad. So if you have an Ipd that's a little higher than 68 to 70, or even lower than 60, it should still work for you. The padding here is very similar to what you'd find on the Index, and it's comfortable, although still a little bit narrow. It doesn't fit my glasses, and I'm waiting for third parties to sell some lens adapters, so I don't have to wear contacts for this. But it's magnetically attached, and the facial interface, what's interesting, if I grab the Valve Index one, it's the same width, but the profile is different. So if you notice, the Valve Index one is a little bit more of a gentle curve, while the HP Reverb G2 facial interface has a sharper curve here. And that's actually noticeable when I press this against my face. Over time, the padding might accommodate for that, but it's one of those cases where I would really like it if HP sold different versions of this, maybe a wider facial interface, or maybe, again, a third party, because this just magnetically snaps on. And no, you can't use the Valve Index facial interface on the Reverb G2. All right, so let's talk about the controllers and the tracking, which go hand in hand. Head tracking, I think, works really well. As long as your room has enough detail and enough lights, a room space like this, it's much improved actually over the kind of first generation tracking of WMR. But controller tracking is where this headset really frustrated me, and where I'm finding myself really disappointed in the controllers themselves. If you watch my hands-on of the pre-production prototype, I was so hyped up for these controllers because they are a massive improvement over honestly, the junk controllers of the first Windows Mixed Reality headsets. I know some of you really like that trackpad, and there's no trackpad here, but ergonomically, these are much superior to this. And if you do have the first generation ones, it turns out these still will pair with the G2. So you can use this if you really like that form factor. But the tracking fidelity is subpar. Ergonomics, adequate. Fidelity subpar. The tracking rings, which are a byproduct of the Windows Mixed Reality design, they bump into each other. When I'm using two-handed grips on weapons, there's occlusion issues. I'm noticing the same issues in terms of losing tracking when I put my hand close to my face, close to a point where, near field interaction solving puzzles in games, I often have my hand up here. It switches to just the gyroscope rotation so often. And the worst part of it is the loss of tracking at the high spots and low spots. I'm constantly doing that dance where I'm holding a weapon in a video game. If I aim up, I can feel the tracking being lost, and then I have to do that twist and get it back into the field of view of the tracking camera. Same with games where you have some IK, where you have to maybe grab objects on your body. When I put the controllers down, I more often than not am missing those grabs because I'm losing tracking. So the no-look, reload in a game like Pavlov is more difficult to do, and I'm looking down to actually see and actually get this back into tracking. So I'm really disappointed. Also, battery life here is not great. There are 2 AA batteries for each controller, and after just a week and a half of testing this, I've already had to swap out the batteries. By comparison, the Oculus Quest 2 controllers, I've had to swap out this once in the over a month and a half that I've had this headset and this controller. Now, controllers for the Reverb G2 may not be a factor if you have the Valve Index already, or you have base stations and you have Steam VR controllers, because you can sync up those play spaces in Steam VR and actually use the Valve Knuckles controllers with the Reverb G2. It requires a little bit of manual configuration. Or if you're playing a simulation game, if you're just an Elite Dangerous player, Elite Dangerous looks so good with this headset, and you use a HOTAS. Or if you're playing Star Wars Squadrons and just use a HOTAS, the tracking fidelity on the controllers become a non-issue. And like I said, the head tracking is totally fine, especially for those cockpit games where you're not doing a lot of lateral movement anyway. Now, HP doesn't have a SKU of the Reverb G2 that's just the headset, but for $600, it's actually a pretty good price for the headset with controllers. I do wish they had a version where you could just buy the headset without the controllers for something like $500, which would be comparable to the Valve Index for $500 for just the headset, although that one doesn't include the base stations. The base stations are kind of pricey these days too. So let's talk about, from a consumer standpoint, for someone looking to buy a new headset, what the options are and where this stands, because things are definitely interesting. Like I said at the start, the state of PC desktop-based VR, the options are a little bit more consolidated. I'm going to start in the Steam VR side. Yes, there's the Pimax option if you really want to go that way, but really your choices are for Tethered VR, the Valve Index, the Reverb G2, an earlier generation Windows Mixed Reality headset like the Samsung Odyssey Plus, or the soon-to-be discontinued Oculus Rift S. And I say at this point, don't consider the Rift S. That's still $400. At $600, the Reverb G2 it's like the Reverb G1 was what we wanted the Rift S to be. The G2 only improves upon that with its better optics and slightly better controllers. So between the Valve Index and the Reverb G2, tracking is so much better with the Lighthouse base station systems. And I really love the Knuckles controllers. Replaying Half-Life Alyx even on the G2 using the stock HP Reverb controllers, it doesn't have the pressure control, the vibrations, or the haptic feedback is really kind of crappy. It's just like a little bit of buzzing when I use the grip button here. And the battery life is no good. It made me really want to just go back to the Knuckles controllers. And so really it depends on the types of games you want to play and how much money you have to spend. Like maybe the best kit option would be buying base stations with the Knuckles controllers and the Reverb, and then getting all of those to work in sync, manually calibrating those, but that's going to be also very expensive. And if you're just playing simulator games, as a lot of people who are in VR just play racing games or flight sims or space sims, and Microsoft Flight Simulator will support this, although it's not out quite yet. The Reverb, I think, is a no-brainer there for its price and for that visual fidelity. The cockpit instruments, the UI, everything looks so much sharper if you, of course, have the graphics card to render it. And the other option, of course, is Tether VR via the Quest 2. And things have quite changed because just this past week, Oculus took Link out of beta. That's the ability to connect over a USB cable your Quest 2 to the PC, whether using just a generic USB Type-C, USB 3.0 cable, or their fiber optic cable. You can actually get 90 Hertz now. And there's a configuration option in the Oculus software to adjust the rendering resolution, and if you go into the debug tool, actually adjust the bit rate. Now, I had previously not been happy with the quality of Oculus Link, and it turns out that a lot of the graphics compression, if you go from a NVIDIA 1000 series card to a 2000 or 3000 series card, the H.264 compression on the 2000 series cards with the latest drivers is much improved. And because you can bump up that default bit rate, which we think is about 150 megabits per second to 250 or up to even 500 megabits per second, a sweet spot's around 300 megabits per second, it's actually very playable. Some of the artifacts are still there in terms of compression. If you're looking at scenes like dark scenes with a lot of volumetric smoke and particle effects, but the Quest 2 is pretty compelling to a point where it's more than acceptable for playing desktop VR. I can see why Oculus has now made that the only play for in that ecosystem for mobile and desktop VR, and also at $300. But if you have the type of PC where you're going to be investing on a high-end graphics card, if you're buying a new 3000 series card, a new AMD Radeon card, and you're spending that money there and you have the disposable income, PC VR is not going to look better than if you're playing it visually on the Reverb G2. And I do notice the difference. I do notice how sharp and how crisp the geometry in games look. The RGB stripe LCD panels here, basically, I'm not going to say gets rid of all the screen door effect, but makes screen door a non-issue. Yes, I can imagine a world where I would want even more pixels, but it's at a point where I'm focusing on the game. I feel truly immersed in the game, and I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm looking at a screen behind some lenses. It really is night and day, even going from a headset like the Valve Index to the Reverb, and it's really difficult for me to go back, even given the tracking inadequacies of this headset and the controller frustrations that I have. So hopefully things will change in the coming months in terms of availability, and HP will have more to announce in terms of the pricing for the controllers, or whether there'll be options. I really hope there's an option to buy this without the controllers. And then tracking, that's a lot of it's on Microsoft's side. And there are some things that you're not going to be able to get around in terms of the field of view of the cameras here, because there are no cameras on the top or the bottom, but things like occlusion, things like that near field blind spot in front of the headset, these are things that we saw solved and improved over on the Oculus side, and I'm hoping that Microsoft puts the resources in improving that on the Windows Mixed Reality side, because clearly there's still appetite for that for users out there. So that's the HP Reverb G2. Like I said, really interesting headset, and really cool to see the differences between the pre-production units and now the shipping units as well. It does make the purchasing decisions a little bit more complicated out there if you're looking to get a new VR headset on the high end. And as a big fan and big proponent of PC-based, desktop-based, high graphics-based VR, this is what I'm going to be playing Medal of Honor on, and this is what I'm going to be doing my Half-Life Alyx replay through with developer commentary on, and it's the one I'm leaving plugged in to my PC right now after a week and a half. We'll be checking in and giving you more updates as things change over the next couple weeks and months, but thank you so much for watching. Hope this video was helpful for you. If you have questions about my experience in the headset, please post them in the comments below, but thank you for watching again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.